In this video, I'm going to be talking about my favorite video and audio stuff that I used in 2021. This isn't all stuff that I necessarily bought for myself, but stuff that I used extensively working various jobs, and also stuff that I use for making YouTube videos. I'm going to break it down into 3 different categories. The first being cameras and related gear. So that could be lenses, grip gear, lighting, and I think that's it. And the second category is going to be audio gear. And finally, I'm going to be talking about some content creation hardware, so like computers and software that I thought was awesome in 2021. Don't expect to learn anything from this video. Just going to talk about some cool gear that I got a chance to use. All right, so let's talk about cameras and related gear. The first one I want to mention is the Sony a7S III. Obviously, this is not a new for 2021 camera. It came out in 2020, but I got mine. I don't even remember when I bought it. It's hard to tell time anymore. What I really love about this is, of course, it's a full frame, shoots 4K, yada, yada, yada. You know, that's nothing new. But what is new and what's like a huge improvement over the older cameras like the a7 III and the a7S II is the 10-bit 422 internal codec. So you can shoot everything in this camera, every resolution, every frame rate in 10-bit 422. And that just makes a huge, huge difference in the quality of the imagery that you get from the camera. Next, of course, it shoots 4K 60 full frame and shoots 4K 120 with a slight crop. So those are really awesome modes, and you really have no penalty for shooting in those modes in terms of image quality. The next thing that I really love about it is that super fast sensor readout. So it's very minimal rolling shutter. It just look a lot better if you're shooting like really kind of kinetic, fast moving imagery. It doesn't necessarily mean like you can whip pan, which will look better. But also if you just have things moving fast across the frame, like if you're filming like a static shot of traffic or something, like cars whizzing by, even that would result in like the rolling shutter would be evident on something like the a7 III or the a7 IV. And the last thing, of course, is that freaking autofocus. This is something that I had never experienced before. This is the first camera that I have absolutely come to rely on the autofocus, and it's totally changed the way that I think about how I'm going to shoot certain things, what lenses I want to buy. Having cinema lenses is fantastic for certain types of applications. You know, they're the absolute right way to go. But for someone like me who is doing like kind of small budget, low budget things, YouTube content creation, getting photo lenses that can autofocus is just like a no-brainer now. For this, I've never had it lose focus on a shot like this. Like it's never hunted, it's never left my eye. It's just really amazing. And even for paid work, I will just use the flip out screen and kind of hold camera with the top handle and support the other side with under the flip out screen. And I'll either just, let it do its, face tracking and eye tracking autofocus if I've got one person in the frame. But I did a kind of a music video with a duo, and they were often in the frame together, and they would, one would come forward and sing a couple lines and, kind of get the idea. And I could just tap on their face, and then it would track that person, and then tap the other guy, and it would track that person. It just really is amazing. A couple other camera honorable mentions real quickly. I use the Blackmagic Pocket 4K and the Pocket 6K, not the Pro, but the older 6K, quite a lot in my YouTube videos. So a friend of mine just let me borrow his for a lot of the year, and I would just use them as my studio cameras. And they're really great for that because I pair them with the ATEM Mini. In order to just kind of set up the shots and monitor them, you have a lot of control over those cameras through the ATEM control software. You can trigger record with them. You can set the like 1-point autofocus through the software. You can adjust exposure. You can do all sorts of stuff without having to touch the cameras. And they make really great studio cameras for that reason. Like if you don't need like tracking autofocus, they're really great options for that. So if you're thinking about setting up a kind of a multicam studio setup for, YouTube or maybe podcasting or something, those are really good options because they're relatively affordable. They come with AC adapters, so you can just plug them into the wall and they'll just run all day long. So I use those a lot, and they're really great for that application. Okay, so moving on to some other camera-related stuff, to talk about lenses. So here's one that I picked up this year. It's the Sigma DGDN 24-70 f2.8 for Sony E-mount, obviously. I'm not a huge fan of 24-70s. They're kind of like the least inspiring zoom range, in my opinion. I really like wide angle, so I kind of like a 16-35 a lot more. And I almost wish that a 24-70 was like a 24-85. I also have a 24-105 f4 for Canon EF, which I'm trying to sell right now, but I think I priced it too high. So anyway, I always seem to get a 24-70 just because it's so freaking versatile. It's kind of the boring lens that you kind of need to have. And this one has been really awesome. For video autofocus, it's been perfect. I've not noticed any issues with it. Hunting, it seems to be just as fast and reliable for the kinds of stuff that I've been using it for. I'm not sure if it's as fast as a Sony lens, but it's been perfect for me. It's kind of big and bulky, but again, f2.8 full frame zoom lens, it's pretty much par for the course. And build quality seems really nice. I know that there are a lot of reports of people getting dust inside the front element of this lens. I haven't had that happen yet, so fingers crossed. Maybe there's been kind of a second wave of lenses come out of the factory, and maybe they fixed that issue if it was some sort of manufacturing defect, or maybe they added something to the lens to make that go away, or maybe it's just a matter of time before mine exhibits that problem. But so far, so good. All right, two more lenses that I used quite a bit this year. They're not ones that I own. They are the DZO Film Pictor Zooms. There is a set of these. One is the 20-55, and the other is the 50-125. These are fully manual cinema-style zoom lenses, and they are for Super 35 sensors, so they don't cover full frame. But I was using them on a documentary or reality show. It remains to be seen what happens with this project. If anything, we were shooting on the Canon C200 and the Canon C70, and they paired awesomely with those two cameras, and they look amazing. I don't have any of the footage. I was just a camera op on this project, so basically just went out and shot. The footage went to the editor, so I just have to wait and see if anything ever happens with this project. And so these lenses are really great because they are really high quality cinema zoom lenses at a price point that isn't astronomical. And of course, they're going to be expensive. I think they're around $3,000-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. And if you have a certain project where you could see yourself needing to use these, the rental prices for them are going to be really inexpensive. They have just really nice and smooth gears for focus, for aperture, and for zoom. And the cool thing about it is, having a photo lens that can zoom, you don't have, you have a very short throw. It feels like it's maybe 25 degrees or something from the 24 to a 70, for instance. And just like on a cinema, prime lens that has a really long focus throw, 180 to maybe 360 degrees, you have that same kind of feel for the zoom. So you can have like a very precise and smooth and slow zoom in and zoom out that you can utilize in shot or during a take, as opposed to just zooming to 50, shooting a take, stop recording, and then finding another focal length to shoot another shot. You can zoom in and out with a photo lens, but it's just nowhere near as pleasing as with a cinema zoom lens. Again, I don't have the footage, but just, obviously I was shooting with them and looking at the monitor as I was recording, and the image looks really cool. It looks nice. It has a kind of a soft look. There's a lot of blooming in the highlights, so it has kind of this vintagey look, but also, it's not so over the top in terms of flaring, and chromatic aberrations should be relatively controlled and everything. So it kind of straddles the line between kind of a nice soft vintage look and a more modern clinical look. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about in terms of video gear is the Hollyland Mars 400 Pro S. I think I said that correctly. These were sent to me by Hollyland, and I made a video about them earlier in the year. Along the same lines as the Pictor Zooms is this kind of gear, prior to just a few years ago, was really inaccessible to most people. There's a lot of use cases for these. They're not absolutely necessary, but if you do any live streaming, they can be really cool to kind of untether your camera from HDMI cables. You could move it further away. You could actually move the camera around during a live stream. And everything else that you would obviously use these for, transmitting the signal from your camera to multiple monitors on set so more people can see what's going on. You can have somebody pulling focus remotely. The quality of it seems really great to me. There is some lag, there's some latency, but the other thing to keep in mind, which I don't think everybody always quite gets when they're reviewing these kinds of devices, is that the latency isn't just the wireless transmitter. There's latency all along the chain. So there's latency from the camera's HDMI out to The transmitter itself, there's latency from the monitor if you're using another external monitor. It's not the one thing or the only thing that's adding latency. I think it's totally usable and workable for the majority of people who are going to be spending this kind of money. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of video gear is a light. And there's been a lot of fantastic lights that came out this year. I got a chance to review a few, but the one that really stood out to me and one that I would actually really recommend that people buy is the Godox SL100 Bi. I'm actually using it right now as my key light. I have it set to 3200 Kelvin, and I have my camera set to 3200 Kelvin as well. But I'm using a 5600 Kelvin light as kind of an ambient backlight. I know I've lost the daylight outside now, but when I started filming, I was kind of trying to go for a blue hour look. So anyway, it just gives you an opportunity to introduce some color contrast into your scene without having to mess with gels and other kinds of things like that. And the quality of the light is really great. It's really quiet. You can control it with an app that pairs pretty easily. And for a 100-watt light, it is obviously plenty of output as a key light. I'm just bouncing it off my wall. So the light's just out of arm's reach here and just shooting into the wall over here, bouncing back into me. And I have it set to 21%. I mean, it could probably be a little bit lower. So plenty of output as a key light, but then of course you can use it really as any kind of light in your setup that you want. So let's move into audio. And the first thing I want to talk about is, again, something that I don't have, but I used it quite a bit on the same project that I was using those Pictor zooms on. And that is the Tentacle Sync E timecode system. Not sure exactly what to call it. What these do basically is you have kind of a control device, a master device, I guess you could say, and then however many subsidiary, or what's the word? I don't know. I don't want to say slave, but I guess that's what they're called. Devices that will go on your camera. So, and then you can either use 3.5 millimeter mic input into a camera like, Sony A7S III, for instance, or you can use a time code in a more professional camera like C70 or C200. So you can jam time code into however many cameras you want using that master Sync E, and all the cameras then will get the same time code, regardless of whether you are recording audio discreetly with each camera, regardless of whether you're stopping and starting recording all out of whack on all the different cameras. They'll all maintain the same time code. And then you just throw them into, there's a separate app from Tentacle that you have to then generate kind of a file, I guess, that you will then take into your NLE. And once you get all your footage in there, all the footage will then kind of pair up with that file that was generated and sync everything up. So again, regardless of how you actually went about shooting, you don't have to slate anything. You don't have to have everything, recording the same take. Your NLE can just find all the footage that goes together. It really changes the game if you are doing multi-camera shoots and, you don't have the ability to be super organized about how you shoot. For this project that I was working on, we often had 5 cameras shooting at once and even up to 7 on certain days. And again, all kind of just stopping and starting at different times and doing their own thing. I can just imagine that if you didn't have all of the time code generated for these files, this footage, it would just be an absolute nightmare trying to piece it all together. All these kinds of devices are just really making high-end production accessible to more people. It's kind of like the running theme of a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here. All right, now we're going to move on to the last category, and that is content creation hardware and software. For the hardware, this is maybe kind of redundant. It's been talked about a bunch this year, and that is the M1 Mac architecture, I guess. It could really be the Mac Pros, the Mac Minis, the Mac Books, whatever they are. I personally own the base model M1 Mac Mini, and I only bought it for one very specific particular reason, because for some inexplicable reason, Dehancer wanted me to review their film emulation plugin earlier this year, and at the time it was only available for Mac, and I really wanted to get my hands on this plugin. So I ran down to Best Buy and grabbed the base model Mac Mini. I'm not a Final Cut person, so I've been using DaVinci Resolve, and I haven't been like blown away by the performance. It's not better than my 2015, 2016 era Intel PC, but it's not really a whole lot worse, which is pretty impressive because that PC, when I built it, probably cost more than $3,000. It's pretty amazing what it's capable of doing with only 8 gigs of RAM. The 256 gig hard drive, I'd say, is the biggest limitation. So you're definitely going to need to add external hard drives in some form or fashion. You know, it's not the most capable machine out there, but if you are starting out, you know, doing YouTube videos or podcasting or live streaming, and you don't want to spend a ton of money on a computer, which is really hard right now. Computers are hard to build, hard to buy because of graphics cards being like completely fucked right now, for lack of a better term. And what I really love about it, and what's the most kind of like amazing thing for me with this computer, is that it's completely silent. My Windows PC is loud. It always has, even when it's not really doing a whole lot, just kind of idling, the fans elicit a constant, consistent hum. And then, of course, if it's doing anything like playing a game or rendering a video, it sounds like a helicopter. Regardless of what the Mac Mini is doing, it does have a fan in it, and I have felt that it get warm, but I've never heard it. So it's really crazy. Like, you can turn it on, do some stuff, render some videos, edit, and it's just silent. So that's really kind of a nice thing. If you do want to have it close to you to run a stream, you don't have to worry about it getting picked up in your microphone. So that's kind of the coolest thing about it to me. It is really capable for the price, but it's also dead silent while doing it. Enough Apple fanboy nonsense. The last content creation little bit that I want to talk about is the Dehancer plugin. I have made a bunch of videos about this year. I do have an affiliate link, so it's kind of self-serving for me to keep talking about it, but I really do think it is awesome. I've been using the, and this is something that probably would have made the video if I had gotten it a little bit earlier in the year and had more experience with it, but I've been using the Phantom LUTs for the A7S III. I watched a lot of YouTube videos about the Phantom LUTs and people talking about them and saying how, you know, you can just apply that, take your S-Log3, apply the Phantom LUT, which is basically Rec 709 conversion LUT, and you're good to go. Your footage looks amazing. You can make minor tweaks to it if you want to, but you don't really need to. I don't see that as necessarily the case, because when I look at something that comes out of a digital camera now, it looks like a digital camera, which there's nothing wrong with that, but there's just, Dehancer just gives you like a totally different kind of look. And I've just been paying more and more attention to how things are looking like on Netflix shows and movies, of course, just seeing how they look in relation to a digital camera. I don't know. I'm just trying to say something different about it that I haven't necessarily said a million times in 5 other different videos throughout the year. To sort of wrap it up, you know, in a nutshell, kind of what I've been talking about is the stuff that makes things easier and makes things more accessible. This thing, I think, it doesn't necessarily make color grading easier, but it does give you a whole bunch of tools all in one place. Previously, you would have had to do a whole bunch of other different steps or maybe buy different plugins in order to get all the different things that you have here. So that's easier, but it also just helps make your stuff look different, which is important to me. So that's pretty much it. That's all the stuff that I got to use this year that I thought was worth talking about in this video. And I'd love to hear from you if you know, whatever it was that you got to use or that you bought this year that really stands out to you and you would like to share it. I would love to read it. I hope you guys had a nice year. It's been crazy. Anyway, happy holidays, happy new year, and we'll see you in another video. Dry January cannot get here soon enough.